Thank you so much for having me. It's a true honor to be here with you and with everyone that's online as well. So, today I will be offering a talk, The Sacred Journey of Healing, Giving Yourself Grace and Trusting the Process. I will talk about what it means to trust the path as it unfolds, how to deepen our connection to our intuition, and also the beauty of leaning into places that hurt the most within us so we can bring light to these places within us. Also about how healing ultimately brings us closer to the tools and practices that really nourish us. And of course, throughout this whole practice, giving ourselves grace, that piece that's often difficult for some of us. So, of course, healing can look different for all of us. Maybe you're healing from grief, the loss of a loved one, a relationship, maybe even a dream that you once held dear. Maybe it's healing from betrayal by a friend, a partner, or even yourself. Perhaps you're healing from the past, leaving behind an old life, or even just stepping into the unknown, that scary place that all of us have to witness at some point in our life. No matter what it is, healing does ask us to trust, to surrender, to sit with our discomfort, and really to honor our own divine process. But I truly believe that healing asks us to give ourselves grace throughout this entire process, that grace to feel, to fall apart, to not have all the answers, to rest, to pause, and trust that in that pause, we're still moving forward, even if it might not feel like it. In those small places where, things might be moving slow, and that's okay. But in that slowness, there's so much still happening. I also want to acknowledge that for many of us, we may be the first in our lineage to really start a conscious healing journey. So if you are that first person in your family, in your lineage to engage in that deep healing, know that you are really breaking generational cycles. You're honoring your ancestors by choosing to heal in ways that maybe they may have not been able to. And in doing so, you're healing future generations. The journey is not just for you in this process, it's for those who come before us and those that come after us. So that healing process is really an act of revolution, an act of love. It's your sacred calling. So today I really invite everyone to really lean into that space of holding space for those who may have come before us, remembering them, remembering that they may have carried burdens that they may have not had that opportunity to heal. So let's hold space for ourselves, knowing that we're not just healing our own wounds, but we're honoring and transforming our own lineage and holding space for that. So trusting that path that you're on as it unfolds, it's rarely predictable. So just when we think, we may have moved past something, whether that's an old wound that's resurfacing, or we find ourselves in that place we may have never expected, it's really natural to wonder, am I actually moving forward or am I stuck? But healing isn't that straight path. It can be cyclical, it can be layered and really personal. So as I mentioned earlier, growth often happens in those spaces between what we think it should be and what it actually is and what's actually being shown to us. So in those moments where we may revisit old pain, it's not a sign of regression, but I invite everyone to see that as an invitation to meet ourselves with a bit more compassion. So each time that wound resurfaces, we're given that opportunity to tend to it with the wisdom that we have gained throughout our path, to see it maybe from a new perspective and lean in a bit deeper to release another layer that's come up. So healing isn't necessarily about erasing the past, but more about integrating it, allowing us to move forward with greater awareness, excuse me, softness, and strength. Some days progress might look like that deep inner work that breaks us open, and other days it may look like stillness, surrendering, and trusting a little bit more. We can kind of lean on nature to teach us that patience through this process. When we think about a seed, right, it doesn't bloom overnight. It requires that time, the nourishment, and the right conditions. And those conditions might keep changing, causing that seed to take a little bit more time to grow. Our own individual healing and collective healing is much the same. So when we can't see that progress, the transformation that's taking place beneath that surface, it's really about us trusting the unseen work that's happening beneath the surface diving in a bit deeper to really say, what is really happening within me? What's going on? There might be small shifts, but what we can do is just respond differently in the moment than we would have maybe many years ago. All of those are signs of growth, signs that we are trusting. Healing doesn't always have to look like action. Sometimes, we get really caught up in moving really quickly or trying to push things forward. But sometimes it means stepping boldly into our power. Sometimes it might be setting boundaries or speaking our truth about something that we may have not said before. Other days, it could mean resting. It could mean moments of grief. It could mean a day of grief. It could mean a week of grief. Whatever that has to be, we really need to trust that we're allowing ourselves to be what we need to be in that moment. So when doubt creeps in, when the past resurfaces, when we question if we're moving at all, we really must remind ourselves that healing is not linear, but it is happening, and it's happening the way it needs to happen. Every tear we might shed, a moment of stillness, the self-compassion is always guiding us home to ourselves, no matter how long that takes. And in that process of how long it takes, something that often comes up is trusting ourselves, trusting our intuition, or trusting our connection to God, source, spirit. Healing isn't just about mending those wounds. It's about remembering who you are at your core and that process of remembering. And a big part of that is learning to trust yourself. It might be trusting yourself again. It might be the first time trusting yourself, trusting that inner wisdom, your gut feelings, your connection to the divine, whether that's God, source, spirit, the universe, whatever you connect to. And as we know, in our fast-paced world, we're very conditioned to seek that external validation, right? To seek the voices of others instead of our own. But healing really requires us to pause, to go inward and ask ourselves, what do we need? What is my truth? And when we get that answer, whatever it is, sometimes that answer might come very loud. It could come really quietly. It could come in the form of a sign. We really need to lean into listening to that as our truth and not keep questioning, because that's coming to us for a reason. That is our truth. So oftentimes, we may find ourselves in repeating patterns, situations, moments of pain. That could simply just be coming up again because we're not trusting the signs that have come to us. We're not trusting that intuition. We might not see our gut feelings as real, right? We might see them as foolish or unreliable because we've been taught to trust what's outside instead of trusting what's within. Many of us may have lost touch with our intuition due to trauma or self-doubt, past experiences that make us question that inner knowing. I know I have along the path, and I revisit that a lot. But intuition is like a muscle, right? The more we listen to it, the stronger it becomes. The stronger it becomes, the more we take that power back that our situations or traumas may have, sought to take from us. So that's our moment when we really trust our intuition to begin to take our power back piece by piece. Body awareness is another key practice that we can, that can support us through that intuition process. Paying attention to how our body responds in different situations, when we make certain choices, when we're around certain people. Really thinking about and feeling into, does something feel expansive? Do I feel myself filling up? Do I feel peace? Do I feel calm? Or do I feel tight within my body? Am I feeling like something is constricting within me? Or am I feeling a sense of unease? These physical sensations are really powerful, intuitive signals that our body's giving us, offering us that guidance that we need on how to move forward in alignment with what we need most. And our body doesn't lie. I'm sure all of us have, had those moments where our body's screaming at us and we're still like, oh, I'm not too sure if I should trust this. But the body doesn't lie. It holds that deeper knowing. It holds memory. It holds memory from our ancestors. It holds memory from our entire lineage. So when our intuition and our gut feelings are really coming up, they're really asking to be heard. So to deepen this connection, something that I often offer to clients, community, is to really start by cultivating a regular practice of tuning into your body. I think sometimes, we're often so consumed, like I mentioned, by the outer world. When we tune into that body reaction, we're really looking at how we can tune in from within and take moments throughout the day to check in with our body and how we're feeling physically. So just noticing where you feel tension or ease in the body, taking 10 minutes out of your day, taking 5 minutes out of your day to just check in with parts of your body. Are there areas of discomfort, relief? Checking into how our body responds to energy or emotions that we're feeling. Because these messages, like I mentioned, hold messages for us. And with time, you may begin to recognize patterns that arise when you're in certain circumstances that your body's responding in the same way each time. So trusting these physical sensations begins to build that stronger connection with self, with God, with source, and allowing you to align more fully with your authentic self as you move through the process. I often like to say intuition is our compass. It's that thing that, we always have no matter what. When nothing else is there, when we might feel lost, when we might have nowhere to turn, turning to that intuition, that's our compass. And often in those times, where we're going through something really difficult, or if we're going through triggers or we're going through moments where we might not know what to do, leaning into those areas that hurt the most can be so difficult if they are coming up. As we know, it's human nature, to avoid pain. We distract ourselves, we might numb ourselves or build walls to protect ourselves. Pain can always feel overwhelming. It can feel like something that just consumes our path, and we just want to avoid it. We might run from it, but then it keeps coming back in subtle ways. Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's a big way. But what I'd like to offer is that healing doesn't come from avoidance of those pieces. It really comes from leaning into that pain, from embracing the discomfort and understanding that within those spaces that might present darkness, that there's an invitation. I offer that to everyone, that there's always an invitation in those moments, and that the only way to the other side of our pain is to journey through that, no matter what the path is. That path could be difficult. That path might be really quick. It could be a longer path, but really embracing that. Because I think we often forget that pain is part of being human. We're always so quick to get to the other side and just want to feel good and move forward. But pain is really an inevitable experience in all of our lives, and it doesn't have to define us. I really feel that learning to acknowledge that pain without letting it take control is that sweet spot, because we're not our pain. We're not the grief, we're not the betrayal, the loss, or the fear. We're just experiencing these emotions. We're not bound by them. And it's really that invitation, like I mentioned earlier, to understand ourselves more deeply, to grow into ourselves. And if we run from that moment that's being given to us, we're really postponing that opportunity of freeing ourselves from that emotion or from that experience, whatever it is. So I really offer that we dive into it, we feel it, we express it in the ways that we know best, and to let it sometimes even break us open so that we can begin to open ourselves again. Because in that moment where we're holding on to that pain, we're constricting. And we might be constricting our mind, we could be constricting our bodies, our hearts. But once we really break open that pain, we're making more space. I often like to think of pain like a wound. If you leave that wound unattended, it becomes infected or it can grow more painful. The more we avoid it, the more it continues to even sometimes affect other parts of our being. And it's basically just waiting for that attention that it's longing for. But when we clean a wound, even though it stings, it might get really red, it gets painful, it gets raw sometimes, it does begin to heal. And that process of cleansing that wound could be uncomfortable, but it's totally necessary for us to get to a point of wholeness. I believe that the same is true for our emotional and our spiritual wounds when we face them with love, with curiosity, with tending to it when it's calling to us. We really allow healing to enter those dark places within us. It isn't about erasing it or pretending that it didn't exist. It's really about holding space for that pain while also holding space for healing and what that healing can bring. So one thing I do offer is, instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Or why am I going through this? I might offer the gentleness of, what is this teaching me? What is this calling me to? And go with curiosity. Because I think in that curiosity, we also can see that healing can bring us closer to the medicine that we need. And that medicine is going to be different for all of us at different times. That medicine can change. And the beauty of leaning into our healing is that it leads to the things that nourish us that maybe we may have never even discovered if we didn't begin on that path. So if we had those moments where we didn't tend to that wound, we might not know what's waiting for us once that wound is healed. We might just keep repeating same patterns and wondering why things are happening over and over. But when we really lean into what we need most and really seek that medicine, we don't know what comes out on the other side, and that's the beauty. So I'll offer that healing is really about fully engaging in our lives and not just surviving or getting by. Often, when we're carrying that emotional pain or the trauma or the unresolved issues, we may hold ourselves back from fully participating in our own life in the things that are coming into our lives. And what we're doing here is really, you know, stopping ourselves from fully experiencing joy, fully experiencing happiness, fully experiencing our purpose, fully experiencing all the things that, God's source universe has had planned for us since the day we were born. So, like I mentioned earlier, we might go into that process of, numbing ourselves, avoiding relationships, or even resisting stepping into new opportunities because we might be afraid of being hurt or with that fear of not being able to handle more or going through something again. Pain, fear, and those past experiences could really create walls that prevent us from venturing outwards. So, for example, after a painful breakup or a loss, we might find ourselves avoiding new relationships, even though we're really longing for connection. That's one thing all of us long for, connection in so many different forms, right? But if we're really not leaning into the pain that that loss has caused, we can't release it. So the fear of being hurt again holds us back from embracing the possibility of love or connection in the future. Or perhaps after, a difficult job loss, we might shy away from taking risks or pursuing a new career path because we're afraid of that failure or afraid of being rejected again. I know for myself, that's something I went through a lot in my journey of, if there was rejection or if a job didn't go the right way, I was like, oh, why would I bother trying to go into a new job? I could just try and make this current one work. But I just kept hurting myself more in that process because I really wasn't accepting what was going on in that job that was causing the pain. So, in these processes, we could hold ourselves in that state of protection instead of actively moving forward towards growth. And if we're in that state of protection, then we're just shielding ourselves instead of opening ourselves. I also want to offer that, pain can also show up in smaller ways. Maybe we've just been so focused on healing a physical injury, let's say, that we've neglected to enjoy simple pleasures like just going for a walk in nature or engaging in a hobby that we used to love. We may just say, because I'm injured, I want to just stay away from this because I don't want to hurt myself further. And we become so caught up in our own wounds that we forget how to enjoy. We forget how to enjoy just simple pleasures. And in those cases, we're also not living fully because we have fear of the past, of what's happened, or fear of the future if we move forward. So when we hold on to that unprocessed pain, grief, or fear, or parts of us become closed off, we may think we're simply moving on or coping by closing off, but often we're unknowingly shutting doors to love, to joy, to opportunity, to those deeper connections. So each time we tend to those wounds with compassion, we widen the path for new experiences and more fulfillment. And that fulfillment might not come right away. It's small steps that move towards that fulfillment. It's also about when you're healing, life becomes a new way of being. So every part that you heal, there's a newness that comes in. And that newness, it might be very, very foreign to you. And that might feel uncomfortable too, right? But that's the new way of being that's coming in, that's asking for you to tend to it. And the more layers we dive into, the more expansive our lives become. And, this could look like something like aligned opportunities. So as we heal through those limiting beliefs, let's say it's self-doubt, we might become more open to opportunities that align with desires that we didn't even know we had, things that we didn't even know we wanted to do because we've spent a lot of time in the same job, let's say, in the same career, or doing things in the same way for so long that we might not even know that there's new things waiting for us. And as we, peel back those layers, there's a newness that comes through. So instead of staying in those cycles of scarcity or fear, we start saying yes to the things that excite us in ways that we may have not known about. The other thing that I would love to offer is that it also brings us a greater ability to receive. So often, we block those things that we long for because we don't feel worthy or we might feel afraid of being disappointed. And all of these things are, things that we all experience. But really, healing teaches us to soften, to receive, to trust that life wants to pour into us as much as we're willing to open ourselves to us. So the more we release control and think that we should be in a certain way, the more we open to what Spirit has planned. And I think a lot of the times we seek to control things, we seek to fix things. We just want to be in the driver's seat all the time. But sometimes we do need to be in that space of just being open to receive and see what is planned for us. So I'll offer that ultimately we start saying yes to new experiences, trusting that even if they don't go as planned, that we're going to be taken care of, that Spirit is going to pour into us, that we're going to pour into ourselves, that new things will show up that will show us where we need a little bit more love or care. Healing also allows us to step into life with oneness without that first thought of what might go wrong. So I know for myself, as I've been going through my own journey, there's always that fear of like, oh, what if I step into this new circumstance, situation, relationship, what have you? What if it goes the same way that it did before? So that fear kind of creeps in. But healing really allows us to realize that life, in all of that messiness, all of that uncertainty, that those feelings are worth embracing because it's leading you. It's leading you on a path. There's these little breadcrumbs along the way that if you keep following that, you'll see a new path emerging. So as we close our talk today, I really want to leave you with a final reflection on grace. Because through this whole process on grace, the process of healing, grace is the thing that comes up for us all the time. Do we give ourselves grace? Do we give ourselves that space along the way? Healing really requires us to move at the pace of grace, trusting that our journey will unfold in its own time. It's really about surrendering the need for that control that I mentioned and allowing ourselves to simply be. It invites us to release judgment and to trust that even when we can't see it, healing is happening beneath that surface. And leaning into grace allows ourselves the freedom to move through life with ease rather than that force or rushing the process. So when we heal at that pace of grace, we honor the natural flow of all of our experiences and all that we are in that process. We also lean into trust through that process that there is divine timing at work, even when we can't see it. And in grace, it's also about giving ourselves that permission to rest, that permission to pause, and release that idea that we have to be constantly doing, constantly striving, or constantly fixing to be deemed successful. Sometimes we get caught up on success looks like doing all the time. Success looks like producing all the time. But success is just simply being. It's simply just being in the flow that we're being asked to surrender to. So healing at the pace of grace looks like patience sometimes with ourselves, allowing those moments of stillness, even when the world around us feels chaotic. Because sometimes when that chaos comes in, we think that we need to also fix the chaos or we need to slow down the chaos, when all we're being called to do is really embrace the space that we have within ourselves and cultivate that space within ourselves. We're also being called to embrace that space between where we are now, where we want to be, without that judgment of what we're choosing to do in the moment. So it's not about pushing through the pain or discomfort, but about gently moving through it, giving ourselves the time, space to feel, reflect, and release. And another piece about grace that a lot of folks not often talk about is about forgiveness. And it's forgiveness of others, but really forgiveness of ourselves. Because in that space of grace, being able to give ourselves that space to rest, to reflect, to do what we need to do for ourselves, we often need to engage in a process of forgiving ourselves. Because for some of us, rest might have been seen as something that was not good. We've been pushed to just keep moving, and if we choose to rest, we're doing something bad, or we're doing something that's not acceptable. We're being lazy. We're told all these things that we then accept into our being that's simply not true. So when we lean into that space of forgiveness, that's where I feel the true magic begins to happen. Because in that space of forgiveness, we start to see all the things that we might have taken in as truth that is not true to us. Things that have caused us to do certain things, to act through certain circumstances in ways that are truly not true to ourselves. And also, like I mentioned, we release that expectation that we have to fix everything. So in that process of forgiveness, you're not fixing yourself. You're simply just feeling through yourself. We also allow ourselves to be, knowing that our worth and our progress are not measured by that productivity or perfection in that forgiveness process. That forgiveness process could take a while, and that's okay. And every time we forgive one layer, another one might come up. And that process of love and compassion for ourselves through that process is so important. So giving yourself grace today might look like several different things for you on a daily basis. It could look like not reacting immediately to a stressful situation. Instead, taking that time to give yourselves a few deep breaths, allowing space within yourself to come to a calm state before responding. And at that moment, you're honoring your own pace and not rushing into a reaction. It could be the act of saying no to something that doesn't serve you and giving yourself the gift of a boundary in that moment and trusting that your peace is worth honoring. Because sometimes, we've said yes to so many things that are not in alignment with us. And because we've said yes so many times, folks might feel like they can constantly ask for the same thing over and over. But there could come a moment where that's no longer in alignment with us. So there's so much power in that moment that you do say no, because now you're honoring where you're at this point in your journey and giving yourself grace. Grace could also show up in a way that you allow yourself to feel your emotions without judgment. And that judgment is so difficult sometimes because we may have been going through life with that judgment of, if I cry about something, if I'm in pain about something, if I'm grieving too long, we're judging ourselves as we go through the process sometimes when essentially we just need to be true to ourselves in that moment. If we need to cry, that's ourselves calling for that moment of release. We're just needing that release in that moment. So basically giving ourselves that time and space to process. Grace can also show up as choosing to say, I'll get back to you if someone asks for something. So you can take the time at your own pace to come to an answer that aligns to you. Because, when we're doing things differently, sometimes we might not know what the answer is because the answer might have been different before. The answer might have always been, yeah, sure, I'll do that for you. Whereas now we might have to think about, do I want to do that now? Is that in alignment with me now? Is that something that I can accommodate right now? So really saying that powerful line of I'll get back to you can give you that space to have that moment. So grace is ultimately the act of returning to self. That's what I always call it. It's the act of returning to ourself. And that's within a world that often pulls us away from who we are at our core. So when you give yourself grace, you're really returning to yourself. And that process can take however long you need it to take. But just know that as you're doing that, every step you take, you're returning to self. So today, wherever you are on your healing journey, I really invite you to take a deep breath and remind yourself that you're exactly where you need to be, that your healing is unfolding the way it needs to. I invite you to say on a daily basis that you trust yourself. You trust yourself to make the right decisions. You trust yourself in this process. I also encourage you to stay to yourself on a daily basis. I give myself grace today and always. And the more you repeat that, it becomes real. So as we end today, I just wanted to end with a meditation that I normally do for clients, I do in workshops, and it's a meditation for grace and healing. And I'm going to incorporate a little bit of sound healing into the meditation. Sound healing allows for our bodies and minds and spirits to come to a place of deeper relaxation. It also allows for the energy centers within our body to release what no longer serves as well. So I'm just going to invite everyone to get into a comfortable space wherever you are. I invite you to gently close down your eyes if you are able, or you can even gaze off into a space within your room, whatever feels right for you. I'm going to invite everyone to take a deep breath in through the nose, filling up the body with air, filling up your body with the energy that you need most right now. And as you breathe in and exhale, remembering that this moment is for you, and you can return to this moment anytime you need. And as you hear the sound bowls playing, allowing yourself a moment of absorbing the vibrations. And with each inhale, breathing in love, love of self, allowing for grace in every moment. And with each exhale, releasing any tension, doubt, or heaviness. And taking time to imagine a warm, golden light surrounding you, holding you gently, reminding you that you are loved, you're exactly where you need to be. This is your inner light, the one that shines from within, always reminding you of who you are. taking a moment to bring to mind a part of you that needs some extra love today, some extra grace. Maybe it's your heart, your mind, a situation. And when that awareness comes up, hold it for a moment. And imagine sending that golden light to that space, situation, or place. Allowing that light to fully fill that situation, place, or space with healing, with wisdom, with love. And in this moment, silently or aloud, repeating, I give myself grace. I am worthy of healing. I receive what I need always. I give myself grace. I am worthy of healing. I receive what I need always. I invite you to breathe gently here, taking a few more moments for yourself. Maybe bringing your hand to your heart and expressing gratitude for the time you spent today for you. This moment is sacred for you. This moment is a reflection of you and all that you are. And when ready, I invite you to gently open your eyes and come back to our space together. Thank you, everyone, for spending this time.